Yan. Yan means benevolence, humanity. When you have Yan and you treat people with Yan, then the country, the whole social order will change. So he was teaching on a philosophical basis, and the dude was thinking, excuse me, my bum's on fire. The arrow's coming this way. 3 formations I don't understand. You ask me to start behaving benevolence. Right now I feel very aggro. I don't feel very benevolent. But anyway, as Confucius was talking to him, the duke like sighed and looked up in the sky, and there were birds flying by, and they formed the word character Yan. And the duke said, my goodness, this is a sign from heaven. He told Confucius, okay, all right, give me some time to think about this. So they took a breather. The duke went and reflect upon it, you know, and kept him thinking. He said, what I'm going to do, I actually really want to beat the crap out of those guys who are going to attack me, and this guy's telling me to behave with Yan. And, you know, he's trying to balance the two. But meanwhile, in the Ngai Kok, in the Wei Kingdom, is a very famous lady called Nanzi. And Nanzi is the wife of the duke. But she's extremely beautiful. You know, there's a saying that beautiful women can give you nosebleed. Well, if you look at Nanzi, you probably bleed from every orifice in your body, not just your nose. She's that beautiful. She was drop dead gorgeous. Now, some of you might have seen the movie. There was a movie by what you call it, Zhao Yunfat of Confucius. Well, not all of it is true, but you know, most of it is. It was a very good movie. And Nanja is a very, very beautiful lady. So she asked for an audience with Confucius in closed doors. So just between Confucius and Nanja. And of course, Confucius was a gentleman. He won't look at her. He just sit down. And Nanja said, my dear Confucius, he says, is it true that you would teach anyone? And Confucius says, smilingly nodded. And she says, would you teach a fallen woman like me? So imperfect. Now, I think most men looking at her would say, well, it's okay, you're not imperfect, you look pretty perfect to me. But anyway, Confucius said, I have a young student. He's extremely good at teaching, you know, young people like yourself. So he passed the responsibility on to one of his students. He didn't want to teach her. She was going way out trying to seduce Confucius. Later, Confucius was to repeat his teaching to his students. He says, you may not agree with me, but Confucius says, a man who is constantly in the company of women will find it very difficult to remain moral. For you to reflect on. Okay, so he tells his students, if you want to become a very moral person, don't spend all your time with women. Okay, because your thoughts might drift elsewhere. Okay, maybe this has something to do with his experience with Nanzi. Huh? But anyway, apparently at one stage, she insisted on him driving his chariot through the city. And while he was driving her through the city, she wanted to go through all this marketplace and tight alleyways which the chariot can barely go through, because she wanted Confucius to lose control and fall on her, or she can fall on him. But his control was so perfect, and the horses were all on Confucius' side. No worries, buddy. They went through safely, and she didn't have a chance to fall over Confucius. But anyway, Confucius thought, probably not the right place for me. While the duke's trying to work out whether he wants to be benevolent or he wants to beat the crap out of his opponents, he started to tell his students, let's get the heck out of here. So they went on, and they went on to later to this place called Chan, surname Chan. Chan is also a small dukedom. And he reached Chan. Now really interesting, when he reached Chan, it really shows Confucius' genius. Because when they were there, the Duke of Chan was really worried because something strange really happened recently. This huge vulture flew and died in front of his palace, and he had an arrow through this vulture. And look, this really ugly vulture and an arrow that looked like it's from the Stone Age. They couldn't work out what it was. And so the Prime Minister of the day, who's a very brilliant man, and all the advisors and all the, you know, Sifus were all looking at it. They don't know what the vulture is. They don't know where the arrow came from. So they don't know what it means. So the Duke was really worried. Am I the vulture? Am I the arrow or what? You know, so am I dead meat? So when Confucius came, the first question was, Confucius, please explain to me what this is. And of course, Confucius is he speaks in a very sort of logical, you know, step-by-step way. So he says, all these noblemen and their wives and all the concubines are all watching, you know, Confucius. And Confucius, of course, bows, Lord, and, you know, he's very courteous. He begins by saying, this is a vulture. And all the concubines laugh. Of course, it's a vulture. What do you think it is? It doesn't look like a cat to you. Then he says, this is an arrow that went through a vulture. And they all say, this is called him a genius. Anybody can see it's a vulture that went through, that has got an arrow through it. Come on, get to the facts. And then Confucius said, this arrow is a Shushan arrow from the Yu tribe about 1,000 kilometers away. And this arrow is the same type of arrow from the tribe where Zhao Mo Wang's daughter was asked to marry the chief of the tribe, and together they were given this piece of land called Chan, which is where you are now. So your ancestor was the tribal chief of the Yu tribe. They used a Shushan arrow, and this what you call an arrow here actually comes from your own people who live 1,000 kilometers away, have lost contact with you for 500 years. This is the story of it. And then explain to them what the significance was. Now, everybody thought, how would he know? I mean, so they went and checked the archives, read the record books, went to go and they have this huge repertoire of all the historical objects. They dug, and they found an arrow, similar one. This was what the king brought 500 over years ago, same arrow. And the king said to the prime minister and all his advisors, how come you fools don't know this? How come Confucius, who never lived here before, know this history? Prime minister didn't like it, neither did all the other advisors. They all said, half time. And then Confucius, go and stay in the hotel for a while. Then the king says, I've decided I'm going to appoint him as my chief advisor and stay on here. And the prime minister and all the advisors got together and says, no. He says, Confucius is a dangerous man because he knows all these things. One day he'll take over the kingdom, he'll do this and that, and they all poisoned the king's head and gave him some more wine and gave him some more women, and the duke got really sort of befuddled and sort of said, okay, all right, we don't want him. So they got rid of him because he was seen to be a threat. He knows more about the kingdom than the prime minister and all the advisors there. It's a bit of a worry, man, right? They weren't feeling very comfortable having him around. So okay, fine, too smart. So he goes off again. Now I tell you about this kingdom that he has to deal with called Chai. Chai actually was given to, it's mini Shandong, it was given to Kyong Tai Kung and his descendants. When Zhao Mo Wang won over the Shang dynasty, he started parceling out different parts of the country. The best part he gave to Kyong Tai Kung, because Kyong Tai Kung is not only his Sifu, he's also his father-in-law. Zhao Mo Wang married Kyong Tai Kung's daughter, according to history books. So he gave his father-in-law, his brother-in-laws and all that, the nicest part of the country. Shandong is a very nice part of the country. Anybody who's been in Shandong knows that for sure, because they're bounded by beautiful ocean, seas, they have lovely hills, they have great agricultural land, fantastic seafood, and it's just a bountiful place. So they give that to Kyong Tai Kung. So the first 16 rulers, the dukes, first 16 dukes of Chai were actually direct descendants of Kyong Tai Kung. And they were very well regarded. Most of them were extremely brilliant, extremely intellectual. And so Chai was very, very good. In fact, I mentioned to you earlier on when the Zhao Ping Wang was running away from the barbarians, it was Chai Hang Gong who protected him and became the first spa. So Chai Kingdom had all the best resources for a long time. In fact, Chai was much more powerful than Chen. The way Chen took over Chai was that he ganged up with five other dukedoms and whacked Chai before they softened Chai so much that they could slowly turn around and whack the rest. They actually formed a grouping of 5 of the 7 to hit Chai before Chai was softened enough so that they could turn around and hit the rest. They didn't want to fight Chai straight. So that's how powerful Chai was. Anyway, okay, by the time this Chai duke came along, he heard of Confucius. Confucius was a very brilliant man. So Confucius went up to him to look for a job and to be one of his advisors. But Chai had the greatest scholars, had the greatest intellectuals of the whole country. And at that time, there's a guy called Yin Yang. Yin Yang was so brilliant, but he was a very small guy. He was a really tiny guy, and he was a very eccentric guy. Eccentric guy because when the Duke made Yin Yang his prime minister, who's about 30 years older than Confucius, he gave Yin Yang the biggest castle after his. He gave him the best of everything. Yin Yang didn't want anything. Yin Yang just wanted a small little apartment, so-called apartment, small little condo, right in the middle of the marketplace in the center of town. And the Duke said, "You strange guy, I give you the second biggest castle in the land. I give you all these things you don't want. You want to live in a little sort of one-bedroom, low ceiling place, darkly lit in the middle of the marketplace where in the night you can hear the butcher screaming, okay, it's time to clear up. Why do you want that?" And Yin Yang said to his Duke, he says, "Sir, I'm here to serve you. If I stay in the castle miles from the people, how will I know what the problems are? By being in the marketplace, I know the price of the commodities, the food. I know if they can afford the rice. I know if the place is being flooded. I know if they've got issues with rubbish and waste. And, so I want to be right in the middle of cities, So very wise man, considered one of the most brilliant men of his time. But he had a bit of an ego. I mean, he was a very brilliant guy, but had a bit of an ego. So when Confucius came, Confucius met the Duke first, then later met him. And they spent 3 days talking together, and as they got to know each other, Yin Yang actually liked Confucius. He says, "Confucius is a really nice young man. He says, one day, I think I'm going to make him my successor. I'm going to keep him." So they were drinking and chatting about philosophy and history and music and art, and they were like soulmates, there were 30 years difference. And then Confucius was asked the $6 million question. Yin Yang says, "In your travels, you've been traveling everywhere. Who do you think are the most and greatest, wisest sages on earth?" Then Confucius says, very easy. He says, number one is Lao Tzu. Actually, Confucius and Lao Tzu met up. And that is a separate teaching altogether, because the conversation is a subject of great conjecture, speculation, discussion, analysis, and has ramifications intellectually, spiritually. So we will leave that to a special subject one day. Okay? Let us talk about what Confucius thought of Lao Tzu. He says he's number one. In fact, when Confucius was dying, he told his students, "My greatest teacher, Lao Tzu." So he says Lao Tzu number one. He said Lao Tzu is a dragon among the people. 人中之龍. Why? Because he says the dragon is the connection between man and heaven. He is far superior to all of us. He can move in and out of heaven like a dragon and be on earth and do anything. He is powerful. He's truly a dragon. He's not a human being. He's truly class of his own, sui generis. Then he says, who's number two? Number two is another guy we mentioned. And he says, this guy is a snake. What do you mean snake? He says, because there's nothing that he does not understand, that he cannot do. There's no science, no maths, no arts, no culture, no history that escapes him. But he's still not perfected yet. So for the Chinese, the snake is the baby dragon. The snake perfects itself, becomes the dragon. So he called him a snake. He will be a dragon one day. So this guy said, "Oh, okay." Yin Yang said, "Yes, I also heard him. Very, very great man." So who's number three? He's like itching him. Where's my name? We're going to mention. So who's number three? So Confucius say, "You." Wow, this guy felt a lot better already, Yes, please tell me. So Confucius said, "Well, as far as the earth is concerned, there are no questions you cannot answer. There's no knowledge that is hidden from you. You truly are the heart and center of knowledge of the earth. And therefore, you are like an earthworm. Because the earthworm is found all over the earth. And the earthworm fertilizes the soil and brings benefits to everyone. You are the earthworm." Yin Yang thought, I don't think this is a compliment. I'm an earthworm. So after they broke off, the Duke said to him, said to him, "Yin Yang," he says, "Have you found a successor?" He said, "No." He said, "Confucius, don't you think he's brilliant?" He is, but I don't think so. So he convinced the king. He says, "No, you don't want Confucius." So Confucius failed his job interview because he called his future employer an earthworm. He actually meant well, but he's a straight talker. He's not a diplomat. I know. Sorry, I have to confess this. My paternal grandmother, my father's mother, is a Kong. She's a 75th generation direct descendant of Confucius. So I have to confess the connection there. Now, I wasn't sure whether the connection was real until I read about Confucius' diplomatic skills. And now I know for sure I'm his descendant because I have the same diplomatic failures, inability to make people feel better.